Kicking things off, we have Sleeping Dogs. You play as Wei Shen, a deeply conflicted undercover cop tasked with infiltrating the Triad in Hong Kong. The story feels exactly like a gritty martial arts movie, complete with brutal betrayals, intense shootouts, and high-speed chases. And the hand-to-hand combat is simply amazing, and it feels so visceral and punishing. Like you can break bones, counter-attacks, and my favorite, brutally shove enemies into spinning fan blades, phone booths, or electrical boxes. The driving physics are admittedly a bit arcadey and floaty, but honestly, it's incredibly fun to literally jump from car to car on the highway like you're the star of an action flick. And I'm still kinda bummed that we never got a proper sequel. But it holds up incredibly well today, and if you haven't played it, you're missing out on one of the absolute best open-world crime games ever made. Moving along, we have Far Cry 4. So, I know everyone constantly praises Far Cry 3, which is no doubt great, but honestly, I think Far Cry 4 refined the gameplay formula even further. You're in a fictional Himalayan country of Kirat, and it's a gorgeous sandbox of destruction. You can literally ride elephants into enemy outposts, flip vehicles with grenade launchers, and fly around the map in gyrocopters while raining down C4 on unsuspecting guards. The stealth mechanics are super satisfying, letting you take down fortresses completely silently and creatively. Some people complained back in the day that it was just more Far Cry 3, but when the core gameplay loop is this addictive, who really cares, right? The gunplay is tight, the world is vibrant, and honestly, the sheer amount of freedom you have to approach missions makes this a must-play on a budget rig. Next up, Assassin's Creed Black Flag. I think most people would agree this is secretly the best pirate game ever made, brilliantly disguised as an Assassin's Creed game. You play as Edward Kenway, who's arguably the most charismatic protagonist the series has seen since Ezio. Sailing the Caribbean Ocean, upgrading your ship, and listening to sea shanties literally never gets old. The art direction is so strong in this game, and still holds up pretty well. You have 3 main cities, Havana, Nassau, and Kingston, and they all have completely different vibes. The naval combat here is arguably the greatest thing Ubisoft has ever designed. It's a massive step up from the basic ship missions we saw in AC3. It's so incredibly tense and satisfying. And since it's an AC game, it has all that AC stuff too, like parkour, stealth, and assassinations. And with the remake coming out, I think it's the best time to relive this game.
You are a gifted man, Edward.
You literally can't talk about open-world gaming without mentioning GTA 5. And the biggest innovation here was having 3 very different protagonists. You can seamlessly switch between Michael, a retired bank robber having a midlife crisis, Franklin, an ambitious gangbanger, and Trevor, who is, well, an absolute psychopath. The heist setups are pretty cool, the world building is insanely detailed, and the radio stations, like always, are legendary. However, the mission design is kinda rigid. If you try to think outside the box or approach a shootout creatively, the game will instantly hit you with a mission failed scream. I feel like it holds your hand way too much during the story. But anyways, the sheer density of Los Santos and the unmatched physics engine ensure that this game remains a timeless playground.
Soft projections for the coming quarter.
They're getting everything that's coming to them.
A vast criminal conspiracy like the Lost MC shouldn't let a goon like Johnny K represent them.
So speaking of sandbox destruction, we absolutely have to talk about Just Cause 3. If you want to attach rocket boosters to a cow and launch it into a dictator's fuel depot, this is literally the game for you. You get a grappling hook, a parachute, and a wingsuit, and you can seamlessly transition between all 3 to basically fly across the map indefinitely without ever touching the ground. It's just pure chaos. But, not gonna lie, the biggest issue with this game is that it's highly repetitive. You're essentially doing the exact same thing for 30 hours, flying into a red-colored military base and blowing up the red-colored objects until a progress bar fills up. The story is completely disposable, and the gunplay itself is kinda generic. But you know, when you're wingsuiting through a canyon while dodging surface-to-air missiles, you won't even care. It's pure, mindless adrenaline that still looks and plays phenomenally today. Next on the list is Saints Row 4, a game that looked at the serious nature of GTA and then decided to give you literal superpowers and throw an alien invasion at you. To be honest, this is one of the most ridiculously fun, turn-your-brain-off sandbox games ever made. You're the president of United States. You get abducted by aliens, and you spend the entire game running up the sides of buildings at super speed, tossing cars with your mind, and hitting people with a weaponized dubstep gun. It's stupid in the absolute best way possible. It's basically a Donald Trump simulator. You'll either love the sheer insanity of it, or deeply hate that it completely abandoned the gritty gang warfare roots of the first two games in the series. And the best part is that it's a million times better than the trashy lame-ass reboot that just came out recently. Let's keep the superpower theme rolling with Prototype 2. You're in control of Sergeant James Heller, a man infected with the Mercer virus, effectively turning him into a biological superhero, or villain, depending on how you look at it. You get to run around New York with massive claws and blade arms, consuming people to steal their memories and appearances. The visuals got a nice bump from the first game, making the gore and destruction feel incredibly satisfying. The open-world activities, like those annoying barrel-tossing minigames, can get super repetitive, and the map feels a bit blander and less dense than the first game. But you know, when you're slicing a helicopter in half with a giant bio-whip, those complaints kind of fade away. It holds up as an absolute hidden gem for pure carnage. Next up, we have Mad Max, and let me tell you, this game is a hidden gem that completely went under the radar for a lot of people. You're playing as Max, driving the magnum opus through a desolate wasteland, harpooning warboys and physically ripping the wheels off enemy vehicles. The vehicle combat feels heavy and satisfying, and the progression of building up your car from a rusty frame to a heavily armored death machine is incredibly addictive. I also liked its visceral hand-to-hand combat. Yes, it does get a bit repetitive with the whole camp clearing mechanic, but the core gameplay is just too good to ignore. It's honestly insane how well Mad Max holds up today. It still looks good, the explosions are gorgeous, and its performance is amazing on an entry-level hardware.
But beware! The top dog's not to be trifled with!
If you want a truly cinematic period piece narrative, Mafia 2 is exactly what you need. You're Vito Scaletta, a war hero who gets tangled up with the mob in the 1950s post-war city of Empire Bay. The atmosphere is dripping with style, from the classic cars to the golden era radio tunes, making you feel like you're in a classic mobster movie. The storytelling is top-notch, and the gunplay has a weighty punch to it. The open world of Empire Bay is beautifully rendered but kinda empty. It acts as nothing more than a pretty backdrop to drive through while you go from one linear mission to the next. Also, the definitive edition actually introduced some weird visual pop-ins and audio bugs that weren't in the original game. Anyways, if you can look past the empty world and treat it as a linear story-driven crime game, it's a fantastic ride.
Get over! I'm gonna get you sooner or later.
Next up, we have Doom 2016. What can I even say about this game that hasn't already been said? It's pure, unadulterated adrenaline injected straight into your eyeballs. The developers at id Software threw out the slow, horror-focused pacing of Doom 3 and brought the series back to its incredibly fast-paced, demon-slaying roots. You never reload, you never take cover, and if you need health, you literally rip a demon in half with a brutal glory kill to get it. Set to a face-melting industrial metal soundtrack by Mick Gordon, it's really hard to stop playing once the combat clicks. The campaign is so incredibly flawless that it still stands as one of the best shooters of the decade. Alright, moving on to Titanfall 2. I cannot overstate how culturally important this game is to the first-person shooter genre. It has one of the greatest single-player shooter campaigns ever designed, period. You play as Rifleman Jack Cooper, who gets partnered with a Vanguard-class Titan, and their dynamic is just incredibly heartfelt and awesome. The level design is unmatched. The Effect and Cause mission, where you're literally time-traveling back and forth instantly at the press of a button to solve platforming puzzles, is pure genius. The movement system is incredibly fluid and makes you feel like an absolute ninja as you wall run and slide around arenas. What's bizarre is that they released it right between Battlefield 1 and Call of Duty, basically sending it to die at retail, but it has a massive cult following now. It holds up phenomenally well today, and if you enjoy shooters, playing this campaign is practically mandatory. Machine Games managed to take one of the oldest franchises in gaming and give it some incredible narrative depth with Wolfenstein: The New Order. Set in an alternate 1960s where the Axis won the war, you step into the boots of BJ Blazkowicz. But he isn't just a meathead anymore, he's a traumatized veteran, and the story has these surprising moments of melancholy and heart. The gunplay is chunky. You can dual-wield rifles and shotguns to shred through environments and mechanized soldiers. It's pure joy. To be honest, the main negative is the pacing. The game frequently stops your violent momentum to make you do these really slow, boring fetch quests in the resistance base. Also, having to manually press a button to pick up every single piece of armor and ammo off the floor gets super annoying during massive firefights. But anyways, the sheer satisfaction of the combat and the surprisingly good story make it a classic. Irrational Games took us out of the underwater dystopia of Rapture and threw us into the sky with Columbia, a blindingly bright, hyper-nationalistic floating city. The world building in BioShock Infinite is staggering, presenting this perfect utopian facade that slowly peels back to reveal extreme racism and class warfare. The narrative features Booker DeWitt and Elizabeth dealing with multiverse theories and ending on a note that will leave your jaw on the floor. Elizabeth is also one of the best AI companions ever made, tossing ammo and health without ever getting stuck in a wall. However, as an immersive sim, it took a huge step backward. The combat devolved into a standard arena-based shooter where you can only carry 2 weapons, and enemies soak up a ridiculous amount of bullets. The Vigor powers look cool but lack the environmental synergy that the plasmids had in the first game. Still, like, the story and art direction alone make it an unforgettable experience that you have to play. Next up, we have Brave from 2017. To be honest, this is one of the most criminally underrated games of the last decade. It's a brilliant immersive sim set on a massive space station called Talos, which has been completely overrun by some shadowy aliens. The catch? The aliens can turn into literally any object in the room. You'll develop severe real-life trust issues when every coffee cup, wet floor sign, and chair could be a terrifying alien waiting to jump at your face. People who've played it absolutely love this game for its incredible level design and freedom. And if you love games like System Shock or Dishonored where you've complete freedom to tackle problems creatively, then Prey is a no-brainer. And now let's talk about Dishonored 2, a game that I absolutely love, but it did have a rocky launch on PC. To be honest, Arcane Studios knocked it out of the park with the level design here. Levels like the Clockwork Mansion, which physically shifts and transforms around you, or the Crack in the Slab, where you literally use a timepiece to transition between 2 timelines instantly. You play as either Corvo or Emily, and the supernatural abilities you get are just insanely fun to experiment with. You can link enemies together so they share the same fate, or turn into a shadow monster to rip them apart. Not gonna lie, the story's a bit of a safe, uninspired retread of the original game's plot, and the PC port was infamously rough at launch. But today, running smoothly, it's a sandbox of stealth and creative assassinations that holds up brilliantly. For pure suffocating atmosphere, Metro Last Light by 4A Games is unparalleled. You're Artyom, navigating the mutant-infested post-apocalyptic tunnels of Moscow. The game relies heavily on this incredible diegetic interface, like you've to physically wipe blood off your gas mask, manually pump up your pneumatic weapons, and watch a physical timer on your wrist to see how much air filter time you've left. The stealth mechanics are entirely light and shadow-based, making every encounter with both humans and monsters incredibly tense. To be honest, the biggest downside is how it often forces you into these frustrating, ammo-draining fights that completely throw the careful stealth mechanics out the window. But the sheer immersion of crawling through those dark, terrifying tunnels makes it a standout shooter. Let's dim the lights with Fear 2 Project Origin. The very first Fear game was an absolute masterpiece of horror atmosphere and groundbreaking enemy AI, but for the sequel, the developers leaned heavily into making it a more accessible, console-friendly action shooter. The hardcore fans were pretty disappointed that the highly unpredictable AI was dialed back, and the horror elements felt a bit more predictable and heavily scripted. However, if you separate it from the massive legacy of the original game, it's still a remarkably fun and very flashy first-person shooter. You still have the awesome slow-mo reflex abilities, and the gunplay is punchy, bloody, and super satisfying. Plus, jumping into a mech suit to mow down clones is surprisingly fun, and that creepy atmosphere still holds up incredibly well today. Moving on, we have Spec Ops: The Line. Now, if you just look at a trailer or a screenshot, this just looks like a generic military cover shooter from 2012. But man, it's so much more than that. It's basically a video game adaptation of the novel Heart of Darkness, designed specifically to make you feel terrible about being a video game hero. You play as Captain Walker in a sandstorm-ravaged, apocalyptic vision of Dubai, and the game forces you to make some truly horrific choices, including the infamous white phosphorus scene that will stick with you forever. It's a psychological mindbender, and basically everyone universally praises it as one of the best and most harrowing narratives in gaming history. Now, the actual shooting mechanics are honestly just average, run-of-the-mill, cover-based third-person stuff, but the story completely carries the experience. And those sand physics, where you can shoot out windows to bury enemies in sand, still plays great today. Speaking of incredible cinematic shootouts, let's talk about Max Payne 3. This one was made by Rockstar, and it's actually one of the best third-person shooters out there. Max is older, completely bald, and popping painkillers like candy while working as a private security contractor in Brazil. The story is gritty, dark, and depressing, but the gameplay? It's simply amazing, like you dive in slow-mo, blast enemies out of windows, and crash into tables that dynamically shatter around you. The community holds this game up as the absolute gold standard for action games. It's a brilliant testament to what developers can achieve when they focus on polishing a linear experience rather than sprawling out into an unoptimized open world. Max Payne 3 honestly looks pretty good today, and it plays even better. And if you haven't played the airport terminal shootout at the end of the game, you're doing yourself a massive disservice.
Hey, Matt, can I buy you a beer?
Do I know you?
I don't think so.
Look, if you're gonna shoot me, and make it quick, I'm a little busy.
Ubisoft tried to find the perfect middle ground between the slow, methodical stealth of the classic Splinter Cell games and the fast, cinematic action of Conviction, and they absolutely nailed it with Blacklist. The game grades you on 3 distinct playstyles: Ghost, non-lethal stealth; Panther, lethal stealth; and Assault, going guns blazing. This means the level design is incredibly flexible, accommodating however you want to play. You get awesome gadgets like the drone, and the movement is super fluid. The only negative here? They replaced the legendary voice actor for Sam Fisher. It completely stripped Sam of his grizzled, cynical charm, making him sound like a generic, angry military dude. The story suffers heavily because of it. There are also a few forced first-person segments that feel really out of place, but mechanically, it's the tightest stealth action game in the franchise. Rocksteady concluded their legendary superhero trilogy with Arkham Knight, giving us a fully explorable, rain-slicked, neon-drenched Gotham City. The combat system is at its absolute peak here. You can seamlessly bounce between thugs, use environmental takedowns, and utilize the new Fear multi-takedown system to clear out rooms of armed guards in seconds. The attention to detail is just phenomenal, from the way enemies snarl at you to the incredible flow of gliding over the city. But well, we gotta talk about the Batmobile. While driving it is fun, the game forces you into these incredibly repetitive, slow-paced tank battles over and over again, completely halting the momentum of the Batman fantasy. But to be honest, it's a solid title that remains the ultimate Batman simulator. Moving on to Tomb Raider, specifically the amazing 2013 reboot. It took the classic Lara Croft, stripped away the dual pistols and turquoise tank top, and threw her onto a brutal supernatural island where she has to desperately fight to survive. The narrative transformation from a scared survivor into a hardened, unstoppable killer is awesome to watch, and the bow and arrow combat mechanics are arguably some of the best in gaming. It's heavily inspired by the cinematic pacing of Uncharted, featuring crazy explosive set pieces and climbing mechanics, but it adds a gritty survival and hunting element. The mechanics and pacing are so good that it remains a fantastic action-adventure game. Kojima's final Metal Gear game is, without a doubt, the greatest sandbox stealth game ever created. You're dropped into the massive open environments of Afghanistan and Africa with unparalleled freedom. The systemic interplay is actually mind-blowing. If you shoot too many guys in the head, the enemy adapts and starts wearing helmets. If you attack at night, they start wearing night vision goggles. And the base management and buddy system offer infinite ways to tackle missions. So what's the catch? The game is famously unfinished. The second chapter of the story devolves into making you replay the exact same missions from the first half but on a harder difficulty, and the actual ending of the game was cut due to Kojima's fallout with Konami. The story just sort of fizzles out, but to be honest, the gameplay is so incredibly fluid and responsive that it's almost a masterpiece anyway. Before Remedy made Quantum Break or Control, they made this incredible psychological thriller heavily inspired by Stephen King novels and the show Twin Peaks. You play as a best-selling writer whose wife goes missing in the creepy, foggy town of Bright Falls, and the dark fiction you wrote literally comes to life to haunt you. The combat revolves around using your flashlight to physically strip away the shadows protecting enemies before you can actually shoot them with a revolver. It's a really cool, stressful mechanic that makes every single battery you find feel like a massive lifeline. The story is presented in an episodic format like a TV show, and it's incredibly engaging. If you love a good spooky mystery, the narrative totally carries it across the finish line. So, Remedy followed up Alan Wake with Quantum Break, a super ambitious time travel shooter that tried to blend video games with live-action television. You play as Jack, who gets time manipulation powers, allowing you to freeze enemies in time bubbles, dash around the battlefield instantly, and create time shields. The crazy experimental gimmick here was that the game was mixed with a literal live-action TV show. After every chapter, you would sit back and watch like a 20-minute episode featuring real actors that changed based on the choices you made. People were pretty divided on this. Some thought it was a cool experiment, while others just wanted to play the game and not watch a Netflix show. The combat is fast-paced, letting you dash through time bubbles and freeze enemies. But well, the TV show aspect was a huge gamble that didn't entirely pay off. Still, critics gave it high ratings because when you're actually playing it, the time manipulation set pieces are absolutely epic. Directed by Shinji Mikami, the legendary creator of Resident Evil, The Evil Within is a grueling, old-school survival horror game. You play as Detective Sebastian, trapped in a rapidly shifting surreal nightmare where a hospital hallway can instantly dissolve into a blood-soaked dungeon. The tension is incredible. You have to carefully manage your scarce ammo, use a specialized crossbow, and burn downed enemies with matches so they don't get back up. It is terrifying. Yes, the story is an absolute mess that barely makes any sense, making it hard to care about what's happening. Also, the game originally launched with this cinematic letterbox aspect ratio and a clunky camera that made navigating tight spaces really frustrating. Thankfully, updates let you turn the letterboxing off. Anyways, if you can stomach the jank and the weird story, it's a masterclass in building tension and horror. CD Projekt Red set the gold standard for open-world RPGs with The Witcher 3. Playing as Geralt of Rivia, you explore the war-torn swamps of Velen and the gorgeous islands of Skellige. The writing here is arguably the best in gaming history. Even the smallest, seemingly generic side quests can spiral into massive multi-hour tragedies with permanent consequences on the world. The Bloody Baron questline alone is better than most entire games. Plus, the in-game card game Gwent is so addictive you might forget about finding Ciri. To be honest, the biggest flaw is the combat. It feels really floaty, imprecise, and lacks the kinetic weight of dedicated action games. The hitboxes can be weird, and Geralt's movement can feel clunky indoors. But like, the storytelling and the world building completely overshadow the mediocre combat.
How you like that silver?
Nier Automata is one of the most uniquely brilliant games ever made. It looks like a standard hack and slash, but it's actually a deeply existential examination of what it means to be human. The game constantly shifts genres. 1 second you're playing a 3D action game, the next it's a top-down shooter, and then it's a 2D platformer. And the soundtrack? It's legitimately one of the greatest musical scores ever recorded for a video game. However, the game's structure demands a lot of patience. To get the actual story, you have to beat the game multiple times. The second playthrough forces you to replay the exact same missions you just did, but with a character whose combat mechanics are nowhere near as fun as the main protagonists. The environments also have some pretty low-res textures and annoying invisible walls. But you know, if you stick with it, the final endings will leave you staring at your screen in awe. Bethesda brought us back to the wasteland with Fallout 4, set in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They partnered with id Software to overhaul the shooting mechanics, and it shows. The gunplay feels vastly superior to Fallout 3 or New Vegas, making the moment-to-moment combat super engaging. The addition of the settlement building system was huge, letting you scavenge the world to build entire towns, which is incredibly addictive. Plus, the power armor feels like a walking tank rather than just a suit of clothes. But well, the role-playing elements took a massive hit. The deep, nuanced dialogue trees from previous games were replaced by a simplified 4-button wheel that rarely tells you exactly what your character is going to say. It severely limits your ability to actually roleplay, often forcing you into combat rather than letting you talk your way out of situations. Anyways, as an open-world exploration shooter with base building, it's incredibly fun to get lost in. Techland mashed up Mirror's Edge parkour with a zombie survival sandbox, and the result is Dying Light. Set in some quarantine zone, you spend your days scavenging for supplies, crafting electrified machetes, and using fluid momentum to run across rooftops and dropkick zombies off ledges. The combat is brutally satisfying, but the game truly shines at night. When the sun goes down incredibly fast, terrifying predators called volatiles come out to hunt you. The game instantly shifts from an action playground to a pure, heart-pounding stealth survival horror experience. But the story's a total cliché filled with every zombie trope imaginable, and the main protagonist has zero personality. Also, the final boss encounter of the entire game is just a lame quick-time event, which completely ignores the incredible combat and parkour skills you spent 30 hours mastering. Still, the moment-to-moment gameplay holds up as some of the best in the zombie genre. Finally, we have Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. Monolith did something truly revolutionary here by inventing the Nemesis system. Instead of just fighting generic orcs, the game tracks the military hierarchy of Sauron's army. If an orc kills you, he gets promoted, remembers you, and gets stronger. It creates these incredible, organically generated rivalries that make the open world feel intensely personal. The combat is heavily inspired by the Batman Arkham games, letting you rhythmically counter and brutally execute crowds of enemies. Not gonna lie, the biggest issue is that the environments are incredibly boring to look at. The entire game is basically set in muddy grey-green ruins and barren dirt plains. There's very little visual variety. And just like Dying Light, the final boss fight is a massive letdown that relies on a quick-time event rather than an actual battle. But you know, the Nemesis system alone makes it an absolutely essential game to experience. So, there you have it. 31 absolute masterpieces that prove you don't need a $3,000 rig to experience the absolute pinnacle of gaming. Anyways, what do you guys think? Which of these is your absolute favorite? Let me know, and I'll catch you in the next one.